Greetings, friends and family. Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin is asking the UN to bring in peacekeepers to help quell the violence in Chicago. This man right here, Richard Boykin, is asking or having meetings and discussions with the UN peacekeepers on that particular subject. You'll see within the video how suspected white supremacists, and this is namely the anchor of the news program Fox News, she goes into saying how Americans are not going to feel comfortable with the UN peacekeepers policing our streets. Well, let me just say this before I get this video started. The police across the United States, who are comprised of KKK members that have been exposed to be infiltrated into the injustice system, need to be weeded out. One of the ways is we need a policing of the police. With that said, I think the UN peacekeepers coming in and doing the job that these racist race soldiers are not doing because they're so focused on killing black lives, I think this is a great idea. I think Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin has a great idea here. It's similar to something that Malcolm X wanted to do back in his day, except he wanted to take things to the World Court at The Hague. But I digress. Let's roll the clip.
President Trump offered to provide federal help to Chicago to reduce its homicide rate, one of the highest in the nation. Well, the city's Democratic mayor, Rahm Emanuel, said no way he wanted the National Guard roaming the Windy City. Well, now Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin is proposing a bold idea. He's calling for United Nations peacekeepers to come and patrol the streets of Chicago. Boykin flew to New York today to discuss his request with a UN official. Listen to this.
I'm hoping to appeal to the UN to actually come to Chicago and meet with victims of violence and maybe even possibly help out in terms of peacekeeping efforts.
Well, joining me now to discuss that, Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. Great to have you with us tonight, Gianno.
Thank you for having me, Sharon.
Listen, you, more than most people know, and have a personal connection to just what's going on in Chicago, and it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, this is not just a personal topic for me. This is a very emotional one. During Memorial Day weekend, I got a call from a family member who said that my younger sibling was in a car with two of his friends on the south side of Chicago, and two men walked up to that car and riddled that car with 25 bullets. Thankfully, my little brother lived. However, his best friend died in his arms, right in front of him. This instance of violence in Chicago isn't something that just has impacted my family, but many families in Chicago. Over almost 35 people just in this year alone have been shot. Over 600 people have been murdered in Chicago. 80% of those folks happen to be African American, and it's really troubling that we have a mayor in Chicago who has demonstrated that black lives don't matter to Rahm Emanuel, black votes matter to Rahm Emanuel. And I want that to be very clear. Black lives don't matter to Rahm Emanuel, black votes matter to Rahm Emanuel. And that's been demonstrated through a number of instances, whether it be him withholding a Laquan McDonald tape unjustly just so he can win re-election, or him saying, hey, instead of me focusing on the violence that has impacted 80% of the African Americans in the city, let me focus on the city's sanctuary status. So this has become very troubling for many of the Chicagoans, and I applaud Commissioner Boykin for having an out-of-the-box strategy, at least seeking information that can potentially help save and keep safe many of the residents in Chicago who deal with violence, gun violence, or whatever else on a very daily basis.
Yeah, and of course, he and the president have been, the mayor and the president have been very combative. They have many differences on a number of topics. He didn't want the National Guard on the streets there, thought that it wouldn't be helpful. They have accepted some additional ATF agents that are there and trying to work on some of the gun issues. But the idea of UN folks with blue helmets roaming the streets of Chicago, for a lot of Americans, that is not something they're prepared to take on. Do you think that the good could outweigh the bad with that? I mean, the thought of an international force coming in to patrol a U.S. city is not very popular.
It is unpopular, but I also must mention in 2010 there was a state representative by the name of LaShawn Ford that came out and had a press conference, and he was in one of the areas in terms of being a state rep for an area that experienced a lot of violence. He requested the National Guard in 2010. So these are Democrats who have said, we want the National Guard here. Certainly when it comes to peacekeepers coming in, perhaps they wouldn't come in and patrol the streets, but maybe they can teach some of the strategies in which they've learned in war-torn countries. As you know, Chicago has become certainly a war-torn city for many of the residents there. So, yeah, I think that the mayor, he doesn't want to receive the help. But certainly there's something that needs to be done. And after my brother situation, I went to the White House the very next week and spoke with senior leaders there. And 2 weeks later, they sent the resources of federal resources. But certainly that's not enough. A lot more needs to be done. And President Trump made that commitment to the people of Chicago that if Chicago doesn't fix the carnage, he'll send the feds. And I am looking for him to keep that commitment and send in real federal resources, whether it be law enforcement, social services, etc. We need to see that. And I'm looking for President Trump, if you're listening, do what you said you would do for the people of Chicago. Certainly.
Meanwhile, this is something, not this particular issue, but this idea of his dust up with the president, that Rahm Emanuel was joking about this on The Late Show, CBS, with Stephen Colbert. Here's what he said.
Donald Trump is driving forward looking through the rearview mirror, and I'm not going that way because I want my city going that way, and I don't want it to be a Trump-free zone.
He said he wants to change the motto that essentially Chicago will be the city that Trump never sleeps in. He wants nothing to do with the president. Do you think they can find common ground on this particular issue? That is, these are Americans that we're talking about, American lives.
You know, it's interesting that he says he wants it to be the city that Trump never sleeps in, because unfortunately, many of the residents in Chicago, they can't sleep because they don't know if there's going to be a bullet coming through their window. So maybe they're sleeping on the floor right now and not sleeping at all. So while Rahm Emanuel is making jokes, while black bodies are being littered through the streets of Chicago, he needs to wake up and leave that townhome or wherever he is on the Gold Coast and look at some of the folks on the south and west side of Chicago that are battling this violence on a day-to-day basis. Students who are afraid to go to school because of his inaction. We need change, and we need change now. And Rahm Emanuel has no business being reelected because he is not worthy of serving the city, especially not all the citizens of Chicago.
Well, you're calling on them there in Chicago and in the White House as well to step in and do what they can. Gianno, we hope for everyone's sake who is involved there that there is great change coming to that city when it comes to the lives that are at stake. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
First of all, I really like the fact that Gianno Caldwell called out Donald Trump and the White House on doing what Donald Trump said he would do. That he would send in the federal resources to help battle the violence. With that said, I think UN peacekeepers would be a great idea as far as bringing in an outside entity to be able to police our so-called police. Something has to give. Anyways, I thought this was a great video. It was a touching video in the fact that, unfortunately, this violence happened to hit Gianno Caldwell's family. So it hit very close to home. His brother, if that's who that was that he spoke about, I can't remember what family member it is, but is very lucky to be alive. It sounds like his friend wasn't so lucky. But nonetheless, we find it highly suspicious in Chicago in particular how in black neighborhoods, boxes or mysterious guns show up mysteriously in our neighborhoods, in black neighborhoods. No telling what kind of crime or whatnot the gun is attributed to, and hence why you have a jail system full of black men and women. It's the big setup. And before I end this video, I'm going to just say this. I remember I was almost set up one day. It was a nice, awesome, expensive looking bike. I'll never forget. This guy rode this bike right by where I was standing at. I happened to be standing, it doesn't matter where I was standing, but nonetheless, he rode the bike right by me, parked the bike right by me, and decided to walk behind a schoolyard. Now, this was a really nice day, a nice hot day. So I'm sitting here looking at this bike, and I'm looking at this guy walking around the school, around the back. And I'm like, that's odd. Why would he do something like this with this bike that looks like it's at least a good grand or more, right? But anyways, as I'm looking at this bike, I happen to be looking down the street in front of me, where I see a white man with a walkie-talkie, what looks like to be a walkie-talkie in his hand. And he's got it up to his mouth, and he's talking on it. And something clicked in my head. Well, actually, I know what it was. Black people, you know what it was too. I'm not even going to say what it was. You know what it was. But nonetheless, I knew right then that this was a nice little setup. A setup to set up a black man to send another black man to jail and to prison. Like they always do. Except I didn't bite. So what I did was I laughed and I played it off. This particular day I had car problems, so I had to take the bus. I was at a bus stop when this happened. So I get on the bus finally arrives at the bus stop. I get on the bus and the driver says, "Hey man, wait a minute. You're leaving your nice bike there." And I said, "No man, that's not my bike. That's a trap." And he looks at the bike and he looks at me and he closes the door and he starts driving off really slowly as he's looking at this bike unattended at the bus stop. And I sat there near the driver to explain to him what happened and how that was a trap to set me up. Now, some people will say, "Oh, you just sound paranoid." No. It is what it is. I saw it exactly unfold in front of my eyes exactly the way I'm telling you. It was surely a setup. I just didn't fall for the bait. But see, white supremacy, namely certain white race soldiers, they play games like that to set up black people. If you're young and dumb and stupid, and you're not using your brain, you'll fall for something like that, thinking, "Oh, this is a free bike." Oh yeah, it would have been a free bike all right until I got up the street, and they would have had all kinds of cop cars surrounding me, carting me off to jail for a theft. But in actuality, it would have been entrapment. Anyways, I'm going to end this video off here. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Or not. I'm out.